throne room of Khanari, the vast chamber echoed with the weighty footsteps of armored guards as they patrolled the perimeter, their polished metal armor reflecting the soft glow of intricate crystal chandeliers hanging from the domed ceiling. The air was thick with anticipation and tension, scented faintly by the incense burning in small braziers along the walls, a blend that calmed nerves but also hinted at a ceremonial importance far beyond routine diplomacy. Princess Sythara vex'Khan stood tall in her warrior's regalia, four arms crossed over her chest, massive body casting long shadows. Her 8-foot height was accentuated by intricate tattoos covering much of her red bronze skin and ritual scars that spoke of battles won and enemies defeated. Despite the solemnity of the occasion, a hint of loneliness flickered in her eyesight, sharp as daggers, but seeking more than just threats. The room itself resembled an ancient temple from Earth's past, grandiose yet imposing. Enormous stained-glass windows along one wall depicted scenes of Khanari history, mighty warriors battling unseen foes on distant worlds, and princesses leading armies to victory. The floor was made of smooth black marble that seemed almost liquid in the low lighting. Diplomatic officers were assembled around a long table, their own ceremonial uniforms reflecting different cultures, some clad in sleek spacesuits with integrated weapon systems, others dressed in elaborate robes adorned with medals and insignias representing various planetary alliances. Among them stood Captain David Okonkwo, his Nigerian heritage proudly displayed through the tailored uniform of his diplomatic security division. His presence was quiet but unyielding. He exuded confidence without arrogance. "All right," said a voice that carried effortlessly across the room, causing heads to turn towards its source, a throne dais at one end where an elegant figure sat regally on her seat. It belonged to Empress Aris vex'Khan, ruler of this expansive empire and mother of Princess Sythara. Her hair was pulled into a tight bun atop her head, the strands shimmering like gold in candlelight. "And so," she continued smoothly, drawing everyone's attention once more as if conducting an orchestra with just one glance, "it seems we have gathered to discuss future relations between our species and those who seek peace through understanding." David shifted slightly but remained standing rigidly at his post near the entrance. He had been briefed on the potential dangers of such meetings, political intrigue, backstabbing maneuvers by other delegates, but none could have prepared him for what was about to unfold. However, Empress Aris added now with a slight edge to her tone that caught everyone off guard, including David himself, "It seems there is an urgent matter which requires immediate attention." She paused dramatically before continuing in tones equally regal and commanding. "Before we delve into diplomatic discourse, allow me to present my daughter." With those words hanging heavy in the air like thunderclouds on a stormy horizon, Princess Sythara stepped forward from behind her mother's throne. The sight was intimidating. Few who beheld such majesty could remain unaffected, and yet there remained an unspoken question hovering over all assembled. "Princess Sythara," Empress Aris declared with deliberate clarity for emphasis, "has reached an age where it is customary for marriage arrangements to be made." Her eyes scanned the room briefly, but then focused intensely on her daughter. "Yet not a single Khanari male has stepped forward." The silence that followed was almost palpable, thick and filled with unspoken expectations and hesitations alike. The Khanari males in attendance lowered their gazes, as if shamed by their lack of courage, or perhaps fearful of the warrior princess standing before them. Sythara's eyes darted across her kinsman, who looked away immediately, while others attempted to meet her gaze briefly, only to falter quickly and then back towards David. A mix of emotions played out on her face: wariness, surprise, even a hint of something else he couldn't quite name yet. "Does no one dare marry my daughter?" Empress Aris pressed further into the silence now with an imperious look around at all present before landing finally and firmly upon Captain David Okonkwo. In that instant, it seemed as if time itself slowed to a crawl. No one moved. Breaths were held collectively as anticipation built up across every corner of this grand throne room. Then something unexpected happened. David stepped forward without hesitation, his military bearing never faltering despite the sudden turn in proceedings and the shockingly personal challenge before him. "I dare," he stated simply yet firmly, his voice steady but carrying an undertone that spoke volumes about both bravery and resolve amidst chaos. Every eye turned to meet David's gaze, every heart seemed briefly suspended until they saw how singularly focused those calm eyes remained upon their formidable hostess. Princess Sythara herself blinked twice in rapid succession at this audacious declaration, shocked, intrigued, perhaps even slightly flustered by the sheer boldness of his response. David met her unblinking stare head-on now. "What?" he said aloud for all to hear. She asked, and with that single word, Captain David Okonkwo found himself irrevocably committed to a path no one could have predicted or planned, a journey through the intricacies of alien courtship and political marriage negotiations, one fraught with danger yet promising unexpected alliances. Empress Aris's eyes narrowed slightly as she observed David standing firm before her, and Princess Sythara vex'Khan's gaze softened ever so subtly. The atmosphere of tension quickly transformed into one of cautious intrigue. "Very well," Empress Aris said in a tone that could cut through stone. "Let us see if your daring is matched by worth." David's mind raced as he processed the immediate shift and prepared himself for whatever awaited next. He glanced towards Sythara, who offered no visible reaction, but her silence was telling enough. "Captain Okonkwo," Empress Aris continued, addressing him formally despite his impromptu challenge to marry her daughter, "you will undergo 3 trials tonight as proof of your suitability and courage." The words hung heavy in the air, punctuated by the hum of distant engines powering Khanari technology far beyond human comprehension. The throne room itself was an amalgamation of sleek metal structures and organic elements that seemed plucked from some ancient arboreal habitat mixed with advanced engineering. Sythara stepped closer to David now, her imposing figure casting long shadows across the floor panels etched with intricate patterns resembling flowing water currents under moonlight. She spoke in a voice that could be mistaken for cold iron, but held just enough warmth beneath its surface layer to keep him intrigued. "Tonight's trials are not meant to entertain," Sythara stated firmly, her eyes never wavering from his face despite their difference in height and build differences. "They will test your mettle." David nodded once sharply. The military discipline ingrained within him shone through even as he grappled with the surreal nature of these proceedings. "I understand," David replied evenly. He took a moment to breathe deeply, drawing strength from his training, but also awareness that this was no ordinary battlefield or diplomatic setting, was navigating something far more complex and personal now. Empress Aris nodded approvingly at her daughter's directness, and then turned back towards the assembled assembly, who watched with rapt attention despite initial skepticism. "The first trial begins immediately outside these chambers," she announced formally, ushering them into a corridor that glimmered under neon blue lights reflecting off polished surfaces and intricate carvings. As they walked down this hallway lined by bioluminescent plants giving off soothing hues of violet and green, the atmosphere shifted subtly from grandiose to decidedly more tense. The walls began displaying images of Khanari warriors in combat seen as vivid snapshots of battles won or lost, and interspersed with these were statues of fallen heroes whose names echoed through legends. Arriving at a vast open space surrounded by towering metal arches, the scene before them transformed into what could only be described as an arena for battle. The ground was made from some synthetic material resembling dark soil, but far more resilient against wear and tear caused by intense physical exertion. In its center stood two humanoid figures engaged in combat simulation holograms designed to mimic different levels of strength and agility. Empress Aris' voice boomed overhead through speakers integrated into the ceiling. For your first trial, Captain Okonkwo will face a warrior from our ranks chosen specifically for their prowess and size. A large figure stepped out onto the open field, towering over David by more than 2 feet, even before accounting for Sythara's elevated position at 8 feet tall. This warrior was clad in armor that glinted under ambient light, each plate etched with symbols signifying various achievements. David assessed his opponent swiftly, thick muscles rippling beneath skin tan to a warm bronze, eyes fierce and unwavering as they locked onto David's own gaze, weapons at the ready for immediate engagement. Combat suit bore marks of countless battles fought and won, testaments to this fighter's reputation among their peers. David took several deep breaths before approaching his designated starting point opposite where his opponent waited patiently, or perhaps impatiently, for him. "Begin," Empress Aris commanded finally, after giving them ample time for preparations. The moment she spoke the word "begin," David knew instinctively that brute force against this behemoth was futile. Instead, he focused on quick footwork and strategic maneuvers designed to keep distance between himself and his opponent while searching out weaknesses within their combat style or reflexes. His adversary lunged forward immediately with devastating speed. For someone so large, however, David sidestepped gracefully at the last second, allowing him just enough space to dodge incoming blows without risking further exposure. He parried several strikes back using defensive postures familiar from his training, but adapted here due to differences in weaponry and fighting style. The crowd watching from elevated stands surrounding this combat arena roared periodically as both fighters exchanged swift moves, yet it was clear David relied heavily on agility rather than raw strength throughout most exchanges. When opportunity arose, he would strike swiftly with precision attacks aimed at vital points of pressure or balance, but not necessarily incapacitating blows. Princess Sythara watched intently from among the observers, her expression unreadable, yet she seemed increasingly intrigued by David's unconventional approach compared to traditional Khanari methods, favoring overwhelming power over subtlety. She leaned slightly forward, as if trying to get closer view without actually moving closer herself. "Interesting," Empress Aris commented aloud after several minutes passed where no clear advantage had been established between the two fighters. "Continue." David used this respite period to study his opponent further through their exchanges, noticing slight hesitations or shifts in stance suggesting fatigue setting in despite outward appearance of invincibility. He capitalized on these minor lapses, timing each counterattack meticulously until eventually finding an opening where he could deliver a decisive blow. With one swift motion, David's blade met flesh, causing his adversary to stagger backward holding injured arm defensively now rather than aggressively pressing forward as before. Cheers erupted among spectators, recognizing this subtle victory over brute force, indicative of strategic thinking combined with physical prowess. The fate was far from over, knowing full well any lapse could cost him dearly. Against such relentless opponent meant David stayed vigilant, even amidst applause surrounding him, momentarily distracted by their praise. His strategy shifted towards wearing down his enemy more subtly through prolonged engagement rather than outright dominance, demonstrating patience alongside skill, which impressed observers deeply, including Sythara herself, who nodded approvingly despite initial doubts. Empress Aris stepped forward as combat officially ended here. David bowed respectfully to both her and opponent, acknowledging efforts made by all involved before moving on to next challenge awaiting them outside this ring, now cleared for different tests ahead. Transitioning quickly from arena back into more mundane corridors of Khanari Palace, the sense of urgency returned full force. Empress Aris led everyone towards an area designated specifically for endurance trials, consisting primarily large chamber filled with various stations designed testing physical limits via pain induction mechanisms and stamina exercises. This trial, explained Sythara, who now accompanied David alongside her mother through these passages, guiding them past other human delegates looking bewildered by proceedings thus far, assesses ability to endure discomfort without breaking. They entered a brightly lit room equipped with numerous torture devices used traditionally during times of war, but adapted now for purposeful training regimen aiming mental fortitude equally as much physical resilience. David's heart quickened slightly at sight before him, yet he maintained composure, remembering military drills back home, preparing bodies and minds alike against unimaginable stressors. Sythara instructed clearly, each station here represents common pains experienced during battle, burns from fire traps, electrical shocks simulating discharges, cold chambers mimicking freezing temperatures encountered in harsh terrain missions. David nodded once sharply, understanding importance behind these exercises beyond mere physical pain tolerance, that these served equally mental preparation and psychological endurance, crucial traits within warrior culture here. He approached first device, which emitted mild electric shocks designed to cause involuntary muscle spasms when triggered. He braced himself physically while mentally reciting calming mantras practiced during intense military training sessions back Earthside, allowing him to remain stoic under this unexpected torment, despite visible pain flashing across features briefly before returning neutral once more. Next came heated metal rods, intended to inflict burns. If touched directly, David instead used quick reflexes, dodging them expertly, avoiding potential injuries, while still completing tasks efficiently, proving both agility and mental fortitude necessary qualities here even outside strict combat scenarios. Finally, cold chambers simulated biting temperatures known within harsh terrains, forcing him to endure shivers without breaking resolve, again demonstrating ability withstand discomfort, maintaining composure amidst extreme conditions, which impressed observers significantly, including Sythara herself, watching with increasing respect, growing towards this human visitor from Earthside, now navigating her world deftly despite initial skepticism surrounding his audacious challenge acceptance earlier. Exiting chambers after successful completion of pain induction exercises, David felt a mixture adrenaline fatigue mingling within him, yet also satisfaction, knowing had passed next phase impressively well. Empress Aris appeared satisfied too, gesturing towards final trial location, far away from physical challenges lying ahead, intellectual puzzles demanding mental agility rather than brute strength now required. This last test, she declared formally, leading them into library section filled with ancient scrolls and tablets storing Khanari wisdom accumulated over millennia, shall assess your understanding of our philosophical principles, different yet valid. Books line shelves, stretching ceiling high, each scroll holding secrets, centuries old, encoded within symbols only trained eyes could decipher easily. Sythara stepped beside David, this time offering guidance subtly, as they navigated labyrinthine passages towards designated area clearly marked for his trial today. They arrived before large circular table-centered rooms surrounded by dozens of smaller round tables containing numerous riddles written in ancient scripts alongside modern translations, helping visitors attempt solutions without prior Khanari language fluency needed necessarily. Sythara explained briefly, noting key themes within puzzles revolving around concepts such wisdom, courage, and perseverance, emblematic cultural values here among warrior clans. First riddle presented read, "What is heavier than 100 elephants yet lighter than feather?" David puzzled over it for a moment before recalling military philosophy emphasizing balance amidst chaos, finding equilibrium amid conflicting forces, equating to true strength rather than brute force alone. He stated confidently. Its silence. Sythara blinked in surprise, tilting head slightly, questioning his logic, until Empress Aris intervened, explaining with smile widening across her face. Indeed, silence has weight of its own. It can carry burdens heavier than 100 elephants through its power of influence, whereas feather represents freedom floating above such worries, symbolizing lighter path ahead. Princess Sythara nodded slowly, eyes narrowing thoughtfully, before offering second riddle. If two truths are told at once, which one will be believed? David pondered this another moment, remembering human teachings emphasizing importance, honesty, even amidst conflicting information. Truth itself held no value unless shared openly, regardless complexity or simplicity involved. He responded calmly, the simpler one. Empress Aris nodded approvingly now, gesturing towards next set of riddles still remaining unsolved across table. David approached these methodically, thinking through logical steps required solving each puzzle, presenting unique challenge despite cultural differences, underlying philosophical principles guiding answers sought after today. After several minutes passed, where David worked diligently on remaining puzzles, applying strategic reasoning alongside keen observation skills needed cracking Khanari enigmas presented before him, Sythara leaned closer, observing solutions formed, now fully appreciating his intellect and resourcefulness beyond initial warrior-centric mindset prevalent among her peers. She seemed genuinely impressed, watching each step leading towards resolution thoughtfully crafted under pressure. Empress Aris interrupted final moments, allowing everyone present recognize completion of all trials. Thus far, she stepped forward, announcing conclusion formally. Captain Okonkwo has demonstrated courage, endurance, and wisdom required, proving himself worthy. Sythara nodded once sharply, acknowledging assessment, though clearly thinking deeply about implications beyond immediate challenge faced today. She met David's steady gaze, now filled with mutual respect despite initial differences in approach toward solving these trials facing them both. David bowed respectfully, again recognizing honor bestowed upon him through completion of rigorous tests designed primarily for Khanari warriors, proving his worth amidst alien customs and traditions vastly different from those back home, yet equally challenging, demanding mental fortitude alongside physical prowess. "Thank you," David said simply, looking directly at Sythara, who offered small nod in return. Her expression softened slightly under scrutiny, suggesting newfound appreciation growing towards this human visitor willing step forward without fear, facing unknown challenges ahead together despite initial uncertainties looming large before them all. Captain David Okonkwo and Princess Sythara vex'Khan stood side by side as Empress Aris dismissed them from the grand hall after their successful completion of the riddles and trials designed to test both courage and intellect. The air buzzed with a palpable sense of accomplishment, yet there was an unspoken tension hanging between Okonkwo and Sythara, mutual acknowledgement of respect tinged with underlying curiosity about each other. Empress Aris' voice echoed through the hall as she addressed them. "By our traditions, Captain David Okonkwo may now have a private audience with Princess Sythara vex'Khan. You are excused." David nodded respectfully to Empress Aris before turning his attention back towards Sythara, whose imposing frame towered over him, yet held an unexpected softness in her posture as she met his gaze. "Shall we?" David asked, gesturing with a courteous nod toward the private garden mentioned by Empress Aris. He noted that Sythara's expression remained unreadable as they began to walk together through the grand palace corridors, their footsteps echoing softly on polished marble floors. The walls around them were adorned with intricate carvings depicting various scenes of Khanari history and culture. Sythara nodded once in acknowledgement, but didn't speak until they entered a serene garden filled with lush vegetation and fragrant flowers that released subtle scents into the air. Sunlight filtered through leaves, casting dappled shadows on patches of grass where small water features glistened softly under its glow. A gentle breeze carried whispers from distant birds singing melodiously. "Why did you step forward?" Sythara's voice was soft yet held an underlying intensity as she faced David directly in the secluded garden. Her red bronze skin glowed warmly against her warrior markings and ritual scars, each symbol telling a story of her strength, but also hinting at something more personal beneath these visible marks. David regarded her thoughtfully before replying calmly, "You looked lonely." Sythara blinked rapidly, taken aback by his statement. She had been so used to her image as the greatest warrior that she rarely considered anyone might see beyond that facade. Her voice was low when she responded, "Lonely? I am the greatest warrior of my clan, unchallenged in battle and unmatched in skill." David's eyes remained steady on hers, understanding the weight of her words, but also seeing past them with clarity born from his own experiences as a human who had faced similar challenges. "And no one sees past that to the person inside," he replied simply. Sythara fell silent for a moment, absorbing these unexpected words, while David stood quietly before her in his military dress uniform, calm and composed despite their vast differences. The air between them felt charged with unspoken understanding as Sythara's gaze softened ever so slightly, recognizing something rare in this human male who did not shrink from the imposing figure of Princess Sythara vex'Khan. "Why are you not afraid?" she asked finally, her tone curious yet guarded. David laughed softly, looking up at her towering form without flinching. "Fear is fine," he said with conviction. "Letting it control you isn't." Sythara seemed intrigued by this response and tilted her head slightly in consideration. The breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers around them as she studied David's demeanor, his steady calmness, his unwavering gaze, despite everything that separated them. "What is a human?" Sythara inquired after another moment passed between them. David paused to consider how best to explain the complexities and nuances inherent within human society. "We are many things," he started gently. "Fundamentally, we're beings who strive for connection, understanding each other even amidst differences." Sythara nodded slowly, as if taking this information in deeply. Then she shifted her focus back towards him personally. "And what about you? Tell me about yourself." David smiled warmly at the unexpected invitation and began to share stories of his life among Humanches, upbringing within a diplomatic family, his training for security duties, even anecdotes from various missions he had undertaken over years spent defending human interests across galaxies. His tone was relaxed yet earnest. As he spoke, each word painted vivid pictures revealing facets of himself that were often hidden behind formalities and protocol. Sythara listened intently, her expression shifting subtly with every anecdote David offered about his life experiences ranging from humor to tragedy. She seemed genuinely interested in understanding more than just the surface-level details, the human spirit itself, as reflected through personal stories shared freely between them, without pretense or reservation. As their conversation continued under the shelter of blooming flora and tranquil waters, it became clear that both were engaging deeply beyond conventional boundaries set by their respective cultures, finding common ground amidst profound differences in identity and lifestyle. The air buzzed with an unspoken connection as David's calm demeanor and sincere approach slowly chipped away at Sythara's protective shell, revealing glimpses of vulnerability she rarely showed to others. She leaned back slightly after another story had ended, her eyes locking onto his steadily for a prolonged moment, their gaze filled now not just awe, but also an undeniable sense of appreciation and respect growing between them. "No one has ever spoken with me like this," Sythara admitted softly. The soft breeze seemed to hold the weight of these unspoken words as they drifted silently around them. David's smile widened warmly in response, feeling genuinely touched by her sentiment, and no one should. Sythara nodded quietly, an unusual tranquility settling over her form under David's steady regard. She liked it, like this human who understood more than most ever would dare to attempt. The grand dining hall was aglow with soft ambient lighting and flickering candles suspended from the ceiling by invisible threads of gravity manipulation technology, a setting normally reserved for celebrations among Khanari nobility. The air buzzed subtly with a mix of fragrance essences wafting from the nearby buffet tables, fresh-cut flowers and elaborate arrangements along walls that seemed to pulse gently under bioluminescent patterns. David Okonkwo adjusted his dress uniform one final time before settling into place at Sythara vex'Khan's side. He met her gaze with a steady calmness, as if he were back on Earth attending some diplomatic banquet, though the reality of being flanked by armed guards and surrounded by unfamiliar faces made this occasion distinctly different. "Your people are known for their hospitality," David said to Sythara, in an attempt at light conversation before dinner officially commenced. "Perhaps they didn't expect a human among you?" Sythara tilted her head slightly, considering his remark. Her forearms crossed elegantly across the intricate armor she wore, each finger adorned with small ceremonial blades that glinted under candlelight. "I am honored to have an ally like yourself," Sythara replied after a moment's thought. "But I understand some of my people might find it difficult." The room filled quickly as Khanari nobles and dignitaries took their seats, filling the hall with low murmurs and shifting plates of exotic dishes that David couldn't help but feel curious about. The atmosphere grew tense despite, or perhaps because of the jovial chatter around them. Suddenly, a shadow flickered across the candlelight near one entrance to the grand dining room, a glimpse, too quick for anything other than instinct to catch it out of the corner of his eye. Before anyone else had noticed this fleeting movement, David's hand slipped beneath his jacket, gripping tightly at an emergency communicator hidden within. "What was that?" Sythara murmured beside him, her eyes narrowing as she followed a similar flicker across another nearby wall shadow. "Someone doesn't like me being here," David said evenly. He stood quickly from the table and signaled to one of the guards stationed near them with minimal movement that might go unnoticed by less perceptive individuals in the room. The guard nodded subtly, moving off towards an exit while maintaining his position so as not to draw attention. Sythara rose alongside him, her presence towering over almost everyone present despite her elegant evening attire. She glanced down at David, noticing how he seemed ready for whatever might come next, without a hint of fear or hesitation in his posture. It was this quiet confidence that intrigued and impressed Sythara more than anything else she had observed about humans. "Stay with me," she instructed firmly, moving towards the shadowy corner where her instincts told her danger lurked. They reached an alcove leading to side corridors where banquet catering staff were bustling around, but hadn't noticed their approach yet. Suddenly, 3 figures lunged from concealment, each armed and clearly trained assassins aiming for David without any hesitation or remorse. Their movements were fluidly precise as blades sliced through air aimed at his throat, heart, and groin. Sythara's reflexes kicked in faster than anyone could perceive. 2 of the attackers found themselves pinned against walls by her powerful grip before they even had a chance to land their first blow. One caught herself against Sythara's knee that snapped upward with bone-crunching force. In an instant, she had dispatched all 3 assassins, as if handling common prey rather than armed men out for blood. "She is mine," Sythara growled loudly from where the bodies of fallen attackers lay at her feet, 4 arms spread wide in a protective stance over David, who remained calm despite everything around them turning chaotic. The hall fell momentarily silent as all eyes turned towards this spectacular display, both terrifying and awe-inspiring in its ferocity. David looked up through heavy-lidded eyes that gleamed with awareness rather than surprise or fear. "I appreciate the gesture, but I can help," he said smoothly while subtly moving his hands into position for a counter-attack should more appear. Her gaze shifted from him to the hall beyond, where other guards had begun rushing in and out of view, some grappling fallen enemies still thrashing with renewed vigor after Sythara's initial display. She could sense something new flickering through her chest as she watched David's composed reaction under such extreme circumstances, a spark that felt both unfamiliar yet oddly comforting despite how dangerous the situation remained. Sythara took a deep breath, calming herself, then turned fully back towards him with renewed focus and posture, and eyes alike. "Then let us fight." The hall began to fill once more as other guests started returning from Sci-Fi, drawn by both fear of missing something important and curiosity about what was unfolding. Sythara's voice echoed clearly over the rising noise level within, standing alongside David, who nodded sharply in mutual understanding without breaking eye contact. Together they fought back to back against waves of attackers pouring out of shadows. Now that their location had been discovered, Sythara moving with fluid precision while dispatching threats swiftly, David keeping pace just as efficiently, using skills honed from countless missions under dangerous conditions across galaxies. Between them, an unspoken partnership formed born purely out necessity, but growing into something deeper under pressure. This continued until only fragments of attackers remained scattered throughout the hall, some wounded and crawling away, while others lay still in pools of blood on polished floor tiles that gleamed red under candlelight, as if mocking those responsible for such destruction. Silence finally fell again, like a heavy curtain draping over proceedings now devoid of any immediate threat. Sythara leaned slightly against David's back, where she remained standing beside him, her breaths coming slowly and evenly despite what they'd just been through. A rare moment displayed by the normally stoic warrior princess. "I have never had someone to fight alongside like this," she admitted softly, out loud, more to herself than anyone else. David felt a slight smile touch his lips as he turned slightly within their protective formation, meeting Sythara's gaze again with an unwavering calm that somehow seemed even stronger in the aftermath of such violence. "Well, now you have." Their eyes locked for several breaths longer before David nodded sharply towards her, then to himself, internally signaling both respect and trust built during moments when most would break under pressure. Sythara mirrored his gesture subtly, acknowledging what had happened between them without words, only through actions that spoke louder than any spoken language ever could. "Thank you," she said finally, voice carrying softly but clearly enough for David alone to hear above the din of recovery efforts already underway around them, a silent declaration of mutual acknowledgement in a place where such things rarely existed before now. Captain David Okonkwo adjusted his ceremonial uniform one last time as he stood before the massive entrance of the Khanari wedding arena, feeling the weight of history and expectation bearing down on him. The arena itself was a colossal structure made from gleaming metal plates that seemed to shift colors in the ever-changing light of the planets, twin suns, red gold in some angles, dark silver at others. It was surrounded by tiers upon tiers of seats where an eager audience had already begun gathering. The air buzzed with anticipation and tension as David's eyes scanned the crowd for any sign of Sythara vex'Khan. The arena itself stretched out before him like a vast coliseum, its walls adorned with intricate carvings depicting centuries-old battles that were now part myth and legend among Khanari lore. "Captain Okonkwo," a voice broke through his reverie as he turned to see one of the Khanarian guards standing at attention beside him. "Are you ready?" David nodded, feeling a strange mix of calmness and unease coalesce within him. He was about to enter what would likely be considered the most bizarre wedding ceremony in galactic history, a union between two species from opposite ends of the universe that had once been mortal enemies. "Lead on," he replied with forced composure as his escort motioned for him to follow into the arena itself, where Sythara vex'Khan already stood amidst a flurry of activity. The princess was clad in her traditional warrior wedding armor, stark black plates etched with red bronze markings and ritual scars that spoke volumes about her lineage and prowess. David's heart skipped a beat as their eyes met across the expanse, but he squared his shoulders and he strode forward without hesitation. "You look imposing," David said with a small smile upon reaching Sythara, "but I suppose it would be unwise for you to show up in anything less." She arched an eyebrow at him before offering a curt nod of acknowledgement. The arena buzzed around them, filled not just by Khanarian nobles, but also a handful of diplomats from Earth and other allied worlds who had been invited as well. "Your turn now," she said coolly, gesturing towards the center where two chairs were set up facing each other for their ceremonial exchange. David followed her lead, moving with practiced grace to his seat. The crowd fell silent almost immediately once he was in place beside Sythara, watching intently as representatives from both parties began arranging themselves along either side of the arena floor, between them and a raised platform at one end where Emperor vex'Khan waited. As they settled into their places, David couldn't help but notice how much smaller everything seemed compared to his towering bride-to-be. But there was no room for fear here, only confidence in each other's strengths, and perhaps something more subtle beginning to bloom between them despite the overwhelming formality of this moment. A high-pitched call rang out from one side, signaling that the exchange would commence. David took a deep breath and shifted his gaze back towards Sythara, who looked resolutely forward, as if already waiting for him to make some kind of mistake or bow down before her greatness. But he didn't plan on doing either. "I am Captain David Okonkwo," he began aloud, meeting her eyes directly once more despite the audience watching every movement from their seats above and around them. "And today I stand here alongside Princess Sythara of vex'Khan in a union that bridges our worlds." Sythara's expression barely changed, but there was something unreadable behind those steady amber eyes, perhaps surprise at his boldness, or maybe just disdain mixed with curiosity. "By the traditions of my people," she continued without missing a beat, addressing him directly rather than to any crowd listening in, "we will now exchange our vows." Her voice carried clearly across even this large space, resonant and authoritative, a testament both to her power and their shared moment of vulnerability amidst such grandeur. Sythara looked at David with an intensity that could pierce his soul, and he met it head-on, feeling strangely calm despite everything around them. She lifted one hand towards him, then down again swiftly before reciting the first vow aloud in perfect rhythm. "By my strength, I swear allegiance to you." David's heart tightened slightly, but he nodded firmly once more in acceptance of her commitment. "I accept your pledge." Sythara moved on swiftly, lifting another gesture for his agreement, and moving on to subsequent vows, which were all similarly phrased. "I will protect, I will defend," each one built upon the last, until she finally completed them all without wavering, her voice never faltering nor her stance weakening. But when it came time to add something of his own, a tradition not part of their formal agreement, but one that seemed necessary here and now, David stepped forward slightly despite knowing how strange this would look amid such ancient customs. He lifted both hands towards Sythara, who paused in response, eyes narrowing ever so slightly as she studied him intently. "I am here today," he began softly yet clearly enough for everyone watching to hear every word through the air-conditioned silence that hung heavy around them, not just by duty but also out of choice. A hush fell over much of the assembled crowd as they waited to see how Sythara would react. Her eyes widened ever so slightly, a rare sign indeed among Khanarians, who rarely showed such open emotions unless provoked into rage or laughter. David continued undeterred, his voice steady yet filled with sincerity. "We have faced battle together and fought alongside each other, learned more about strength than either of us imagined possible." His gaze never left hers as he spoke directly from the heart now rather than any preconceived script. "Today, though, I pledge my life to you, not because we must but because I choose to." A collective gasp rippled through parts of the crowd at his words, many likely thinking this was some kind of joke or defiance against tradition. But Sythara listened on intently, her posture easing marginally, as David continued, speaking honestly from a place few ever dared. "I see you, Princess, every bit of who you are." He paused briefly to emphasize those next crucial lines clearly. "Your strength, your courage, and even sometimes your stubbornness." Laughter broke out among some in the audience at this unexpected turn, most likely surprised by his candor. But David held their gazes firmly until he was certain everyone had heard. "And so I ask now," he concluded slowly, leaning forward slightly, as if offering something sacred to her gaze alone amidst all else around. Do you see me too?" Sythara's breath caught in her throat at these words, unlike anything she'd ever experienced from anyone before. Her eyes softened momentarily, while David held his own gaze steady and open, waiting for whatever reaction might come next. It was quiet for several tense seconds, as the audience seemed to hold its collective breath around them, until finally Sythara spoke up in a voice that trembled slightly but sounded clear enough. "I do." The arena erupted into murmurs then, many looking confused by such an unusual turn of events. But David and Sythara exchanged one long look before turning back together towards the Emperor waiting on his raised platform at far end. "Now we will seal our bond," said vex'Khan formally, as he stepped down from his perch to stand beside them both, looking between husband-to-be and wife-elect with a mixture of pride and perhaps also wonderment. "In accordance with my decree, let it be known that this union is now complete." Sythara turned fully towards David then, for the first time since all proceedings began, not just facing him formally, as tradition required, but truly meeting his eyes as an equal partner would do. And as she did so, tears welled up in her red bronze eyes, glistening against the stark black of her ceremonial armor. She started hesitantly before pausing again, clearly overwhelmed by this new turn of events beyond anything expected or prepared for. David stepped closer then, without hesitation, and reached out to gently place a hand on Sythara's shoulder, a comforting gesture that spoke volumes about mutual respect built under shared circumstances far from home. "It's okay," he said softly, offering her a small reassuring smile before turning back towards the Emperor, who nodded once in approval at this final act of true partnership being sealed here today. Then David turned fully to Sythara again one last time. "I choose you, Sythara." His voice was calm yet resolute, as if confirming something not just for public record, but also within himself. "All of you." Sythara blinked once more before stepping forward slightly herself, reaching out hesitantly to place a single hand over David's, still resting upon her shoulder, a gesture that felt both awkward and perfectly natural amidst all else around them. "Use you too," she finally said aloud, voice sounding raw yet oddly clear against everything surrounding them. "David." The crowd fell silent once more, as if in stunned awe of what they had just witnessed, some turning to each other with speculative looks, while others simply stared openly at this unusual pair standing side by side here amidst tradition and change. And then it was over, this momentous ceremony that would forever alter the course between two distant worlds. David looked back up towards Sythara, who now gazed steadily back, once more, all traces of initial reluctance or wariness gone from her eyes, as if washed away somehow in these few moments shared together under pressure and challenge. "I'm glad," she said softly then, almost to herself, but clearly enough for him alone to hear amidst this still air. "I didn't know I could cry." David simply smiled gently at that, knowing they had both just stepped into something new, something far beyond anything either of them might have anticipated back when first duty bound them together. But now it was different. "I'm glad too," he replied honestly, his voice carrying softly across this immense space, as if speaking directly to her heart rather than merely addressing an audience. "Welcome home." And then they turned finally towards the crowd assembled around them, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing fully well that They could face anything. Captain David Okonkwo stood beside Princess Sythara, vex'Khan, in their private chambers, the vast space echoing with the quiet aftermath of a ceremony that had shaken both worlds to their cores. The room was adorned with intricate Khanari tapestries and ceremonial items, each telling stories of battle and triumph. Yet tonight, it held only two people entwined by an unexpected bond. Sythara's armor lay discarded on a nearby pedestal, the metallic clinks echoing softly in the silence as David gently unbuckled her gauntlets. Her red bronze skin glowed under soft ambient lighting that cast shadows around them, making every gesture and expression seem weighty with significance. "Are you okay?" David asked quietly, his hand resting on hers where it lay near a small table filled with fruit and wine, untouched since the ceremony concluded. Sythara turned her gaze to him, eyes wide yet calm. "I am now," she replied slowly, more to herself than him, as if savoring each word for its truth and weight. She took another deep breath before continuing, "It is just unexpected." David nodded in understanding, a small smile playing at the edges of his lips. He reached out again, this time cradling her cheek with one hand while brushing back some stray tendrils from under her ceremonial headgear with the oath. I know it seems that way," he said softly but firmly, looking straight into those expressive eyes, now free from formal bindings. "But you're not alone anymore." Sythara's gaze softened slightly at his words, a rare moment of vulnerability breaking through her formidable exterior. Her voice was a low whisper when she spoke next, almost in disbelief yet tinged with gratitude and something else he couldn't quite place. I am grateful," Sythara confessed quietly, but also terrified. David raised an eyebrow curiously, but didn't press further right away, instead opting for gentle encouragement. "It's okay to be scared," he told her, his tone softening even more as if speaking through the night air itself rather than directly. "But why are you?" she countered hesitantly, after a moment's pause, turning towards him with a hint of confusion and curiosity intertwining in those warrior eyes that had seen countless battles yet remained unaccustomed to vulnerability like this one required from her today. David sighed softly before answering honestly. "I was terrified the whole time too," he admitted, his grip tightening around Sythara's hand as if seeking comfort just as much as offering it. He looked up at her then, meeting those imposing eyes with a level of calmness that belied everything inside him, a storm brewing beneath this surface-level composure. "The fear doesn't mean we shouldn't do things," he continued steadfastly, almost to convince himself more than reassure her. "And I chose you." Sythara blinked slowly at his admission, eyes searching for something specific in the honesty of those words, and that look she rarely saw from anyone else. It seemed like a rare moment where emotions weren't just an obstacle, but part of understanding each other, a language both needed to learn here amidst all these changes. "You chose me," she repeated softly, as if testing its weight on her tongue, then nodded slowly once they truly registered fully within the quiet space around them, each movement carrying significance in this new chapter neither expected nor prepared for. "I see you now," David stated firmly, but gently, his tone warm and sincere without any hint of condescension or pity. "The warrior, the princess, and something more." Sythara's gaze softened further at his words, her four-armed form relaxed slightly, under the rare touch of vulnerability shared equally between them in this moment. She reached out with two hands gently, for all their strength, and brushed back some strands from David's hairline as if studying every feature carefully, now free from ceremonial expectations. "Tell me more," she requested quietly but insistently, almost like a child seeking reassurance amidst uncertainty and change. stark contrast to the warrior facade so familiar yet distant in this new light of acceptance they shared openly here today. "What do you see?" David smiled warmly at her question despite its unusual nature between them. There was something humbling about being asked such personal questions by someone as intimidating as Sythara under these circumstances. "I see the woman who laughs at bad jokes and cries at beautiful words," he said with a small chuckle, almost to break some of this heavy atmosphere around their bond, now cemented officially yet still so fragile in many ways beneath layers of ceremony and duty. "But mostly, I see someone brave enough to lead others without needing recognition." Sythara blinked rapidly several times, as if processing his words thoroughly before finally nodding slowly again, her own smile breaking through the tension like sunlight piercing dark clouds. A rare moment indeed for both of them amidst all this change they had brought upon themselves and their worlds. "And what do you see?" she asked in return, her voice softer now yet carrying more confidence within it, as if seeking mutual understanding rather than just answers, both wanting to know truly who the other was beyond formalities here today. David looked up at Sythara, then, with a mix of respect and genuine curiosity visible on his face, his response carried weight not just in words, but also gesture. "I see you," he answered simply yet profoundly, almost as if it were both an admission and revelation, all wrapped into one breath. He took her hand again gently, though this time more confidently now that the initial shock had subsided somewhat between them under shared experiences far from home. Sythara's eyes softened further upon hearing those words, something rare for someone so accustomed to commanding awe rather than eliciting such open, unguarded feelings here today. Amidst everything they faced together, she squeezed his hand back gently, as if affirming the connection made despite all odds and barriers erected between them under ceremonial constraints, but now broken freely by mutual understanding. "Thank you," she whispered genuinely before tilting her head slightly in consideration of what David had said about seeing beyond formality here, seeking deeper truths that lay hidden beneath layers of tradition and duty. "You are the bravest person I've met." David chuckled softly at this, shaking his head gently but with genuine admiration for how well she understood yet challenged him so openly, even in these rare moments shared together under all circumstances. "Or perhaps just the dumbest," he joked lightly, though there was also truth mixed within those words, as if acknowledging they both had stepped into something new, something far beyond anything anticipated initially back when first duty bound them here, amidst challenges and changes for their worlds. Sythara's gaze softened further still at his joke, a rare moment of genuine laughter breaking free from the warrior persona she usually kept firmly in place under all circumstances, a sound that seemed to echo through this vast space filled with ceremony, items yet now devoid of formalities, as they shared truths openly here together amidst everything around them. "Perhaps both," she agreed gently, but sincerely acknowledging the journey and connection made despite initial fears and reservations from either side. She looked down at David then, her imposing form dwarfing him slightly in physical stature yet somehow seeming smaller under mutual understanding now forged between warrior princess and diplomatic security officer amidst all else around them. And then she leaned forward gently, a gesture full of cautious yet unmistakable tenderness given her size and strength in action that left no room for doubt about the connection shared here today beyond mere formalities. She kissed him softly on the lips, a touch so gentle it could almost be mistaken as an embrace were not for their immense physical difference, something profound connecting them now under shared vulnerability. amidst everything else around. "My husband," Sythara whispered into that brief kiss, her voice carrying more truth and intimacy than any formal proclamation ever would or could amidst all these changes brought forth by this union between two worlds. David pulled back slightly to look at Sythara again, a mix of surprise and genuine joy on his face under shared understanding here today. "My wife," he echoed quietly, but with heartfelt conviction, acknowledging not just a partnership borne out duty, but one formed through mutual respect, challenge, and acceptance amidst all these layers stripped away finally between them. And in that moment, among the tapestries and ceremonial items telling stories of battles won and lost long ago, the princess who terrified everyone found her home in the one person brave enough to see beyond formality into a heart open despite initial fears, faced bravely together here tonight under shared vulnerability amidst everything else surrounding them. The end.